The notification sound came at 2:17 in the morning. I was lying in bed next to Iris, staring at the ceiling and listening to the old house settle around us. 20-year-old pipes groaned behind the walls, and somewhere downstairs a floorboard creaked the way it always did when the temperature dropped. Maine winters had a way of making everything sound haunted. The phone buzzed again on her nightstand. Then again. Iris didn't stir. She'd always been a heavy sleeper, especially after her evening wine ritual. 2 glasses of Pinot Grigio while watching reality television shows about people whose problems made ours look manageable. At least, that's what I used to think. The 4th buzz made me curious enough to roll over and glance at her screen. The preview showed a contact name that made my stomach tighten. Dr. C. Missing you already. Can't wait for next weekend. I knew Dr. C. I'd shaken his hand at family barbecues, listened to him complain about insurance companies over beer, watched him carve turkey at Thanksgiving dinners. Dr. Clement Morrison, my wife's sister's husband, the family dentist who always had a joke ready and never forgot to ask about my carpentry projects, the man texting my wife at 2 in the morning. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb the mattress springs, and padded to my workshop in the basement. The space smelled like sawdust and motor oil, familiar scents that usually calmed my nerves. Tonight, they couldn't touch the cold knot forming in my chest. I fired up my laptop and opened a new folder, named it Anniversary without really knowing why. Maybe because Maren and Clement's 10th anniversary party was coming up in 3 weeks. Maybe because it felt like the end of something. Over the next hour, I sat in the blue glow of the screen and planned. Not revenge. Not yet. Just information gathering. If my wife was having an affair with her sister's husband, I needed proof before I did anything stupid. The next morning, Iris hummed while making coffee. She wore her favorite yellow sundress, the one that brought out the green in her eyes, and moved around our kitchen like she was dancing to music only she could hear. "Sleep well?" she asked, not looking up from the coffee maker. "Like a rock," I lied. "You?" She smiled. That same smile she'd given me on our wedding day 6 years ago. "I was thinking we should do something special this weekend. Maybe drive up to Bar Harbor?" "Sounds nice." I buttered my toast and watched her face. "Didn't you say something about visiting your sister?" The smile flickered for just a moment. "Oh, that. Maren's busy with anniversary party planning. You know how she gets." I knew how Maren got. My sister-in-law was the type who color-coordinated her grocery lists and sent thank you cards for thank you cards. If she was planning a party, every detail would be scheduled down to the minute, which made it interesting that Iris suddenly had a free weekend. "Maybe another time then," I said. "Maybe." She kissed my forehead before leaving for work, the same ritual we'd maintained for years. I used to look forward to that kiss. This morning it felt like a performance. After her car disappeared down our gravel driveway, I went back to the basement and opened the anniversary folder. Time to get serious about this. The first thing I did was call Jerry Hutchins. Jerry and I had been friends since high school, back when we thought the biggest problems in life involved passing algebra and asking girls to prom. Now he ran a security installation business, the kind that helped nervous homeowners sleep better at night. "Roland, you old bastard," Jerry's voice crackled through the phone. "What's got you calling before 9 a.m.? House finally fall down?" Something like that. I explained what I needed without explaining why. Jerry had installed enough security systems to know that sometimes people needed to recover information from devices they owned, legally owned. "Bring it by the shop this afternoon," he said. "And Roland, whatever you're digging into, be careful. Sometimes the hole ends up deeper than you planned." The rest of the morning I worked on a kitchen renovation project for the Hendersons, a young couple who'd moved to town from Portland seeking small-town charm. I measured twice, cut once, and tried not to think about text messages sent in the middle of the night. But my hands knew the work well enough that my mind wandered. How long had this been going on? Was I the only one who didn't know? Did Maren suspect anything? By lunch, I had a plan forming. Not the whole picture yet, just the outline. Like framing a house, you start with the foundation and work your way up. That afternoon, I drove to Jerry's shop with Iris's phone. She'd left it charging on the kitchen counter, another part of her daily routine. Jerry's workspace looked like an electronics graveyard crossed with a spy movie set. Cables snaked across workbenches, and monitors displayed feeds from security cameras around town. "This might take a while," Jerry said, connecting Iris's phone to one of his computers. "Why don't you grab us some coffee from the Anchor?" The Anchor was our local bar, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. I ordered 2 coffees from Pauline, the bartender who'd been serving drinks since before I was born. "Heard the Morrisons are throwing quite a party," she said, sliding the cups across the bar. "10th anniversary. Maren's been in here twice this week, talking about decorations and catering." "Should be nice," I said. "You're Iris helping with the planning?" "You know Iris, always helpful." Pauline nodded, but something in her expression suggested she knew more than she was saying. Small towns were like that. Secrets had a way of floating around until everyone knew pieces of the truth, even if nobody talked about it directly. When I got back to Jerry's shop, he was staring at his computer screen with the expression of someone who'd found something he wished he hadn't. "How bad?" I asked. "Depends on what you consider bad." He turned the monitor toward me. "There's a lot here, Roland. Going back 14 months. You sure you want to see this?" I sat down and started reading. The messages began innocent enough. "Thanks for helping with Mom's birthday party. Hope you enjoyed the dinner. Maren's lucky to have you." Then they evolved. Compliments became flirtation. Flirtation became suggestion. Suggestion became explicit planning. "Can't stop thinking about last weekend. Maren's visiting her mother Thursday. My office is private. The way you looked at me during dinner, I wanted to drag you upstairs. Next family gathering, let's sneak away. I know a place. I read for an hour, watching my marriage dissolve into a timeline of betrayal. Every family barbecue, every holiday dinner, every celebration had been cover for their affair. While I carved turkey and Maren fussed over place settings, my wife and her sister's husband were planning their next encounter. The worst part wasn't the explicit content. It was the casual cruelty, the way they joked about deceiving us, the pet names they'd given each other, the detailed descriptions of where and when they'd been together. Roland's working late again. Perfect timing. Maren thinks I'm at a dental conference. If only she knew what I was really studying. Your husband's so clueless. Does he suspect anything? Not a thing. He trusts me completely. Poor guy. Jerry watched me read, his face grim. "What are you going to do?" I saved everything to a flash drive, then copied it to the anniversary folder on my laptop. Screenshots, timestamps, metadata, everything. "I'm going to a party," I said. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange haze of normalcy. Iris continued her routines. Work, wine, television, sleep. She kissed my forehead each morning and asked about my day each evening. We discussed grocery lists and weekend plans and whether we should replace the living room carpet. Meanwhile, I planned. I researched the venue Maren had chosen for their anniversary party. The Riverside Event Hall sat on the banks of the Penobscot River, a restored Victorian mansion that hosted weddings and celebrations. 50 guests expected. Catered dinner. Open bar. Dancing until midnight. Perfect acoustics for public speaking. I practiced my toast in the workshop, reading from the printed messages until I could recite them without stumbling over the explicit details. The words felt like poison in my mouth, but I forced myself to continue. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. Iris noticed I seemed distracted. "Everything okay?" she asked one evening, curling up beside me on the couch. "You've been quiet lately." "Just thinking about work stuff," I said. "The Peterson job is more complicated than I expected." She rested her head on my shoulder, and for a moment I almost wavered. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of shared jokes and lazy Sunday mornings and plans for the future. Maybe I could confront her privately. Maybe we could work through this. Then her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. C, and the moment passed. 2 days before the anniversary party, I made final preparations. I printed the most damning messages on good paper, the kind used for wedding invitations. I practiced my delivery one more time, timing myself. 4 minutes to read the highlights, 4 minutes to end 2 marriages. The night before the party, Iris spent an hour getting ready. She chose a blue dress that complemented her figure and spent extra time on her makeup. "You look beautiful," I told her, and meant it. She did look beautiful. She also looked like a woman preparing to see her lover at a family celebration. "Thank you." She smiled and adjusted her earrings. "I want everything to be perfect for Maren and Clement. They deserve a wonderful evening." "They deserve exactly what they get," I said. The morning of the anniversary party dawned clear and cold, the kind of October day that made Maine postcards look honest. I woke before sunrise and sat in my workshop, reviewing the printed messages one final time. The paper felt substantial in my hands, each sheet weighted with the power to destroy lives. Upstairs, Iris moved through her morning routine with unusual energy. I could hear her humming in the shower, the sound carrying through the old house's thin walls. She was happy, anticipating something. I wondered if Clement was humming too, getting ready in the house he shared with Maren, preparing for an evening where he'd smile at his wife while planning to slip away with her sister. "Coffee's ready," Iris called from the kitchen. I folded the papers and slipped them into my jacket pocket, then climbed the stairs to join my wife for what would be our last breakfast together. She'd set the table with our good dishes, the ones we usually saved for holidays: scrambled eggs, wheat toast, fresh orange juice. The morning light streaming through our kitchen window made everything look golden and peaceful. "Special occasion?" I asked. "Just felt like doing something nice." She poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one she'd bought me for our 3rd anniversary. "Besides, we should probably eat well before the party. You know how these events go, lots of cocktails, not much food until late." I watched her face as she spoke. No guilt, no nervousness, no sign that she was planning to betray her sister in front of 50 family members and friends. Either she was a better actress than I'd given her credit for, or she'd convinced herself that what she was doing wasn't really wrong. "Maren must be nervous," I said. 10 years is a big milestone. "She's been planning this for months." Iris sat across from me, her green eyes bright with something that might have been excitement. "Every detail perfect. She wants everyone to see how happy she and Clement are." "And are they? Happy?" The question hung in the air between us. Iris took a sip of coffee, considering her answer. "I think so," she said finally. "I mean, they have their issues like any couple, but they're solid. They trust each other completely." The irony was so thick I could taste it. I bit into my toast and nodded. "Trust is important in a marriage," I said. "The most important thing," she agreed. After breakfast, I drove to Jerry's shop. He was expecting me, had cleared his schedule for the morning. We discussed the plan over beer the night before, sitting in his backyard while his wife Karen made dinner and pretended not to listen to our conversation. "You sure about this?" Jerry asked as I parked outside his building. "Once you pull that trigger, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure." Jerry's shop occupied the ground floor of a converted mill building, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. He'd built a good business helping people protect what mattered to them. Today, he was helping me destroy what had already been taken. "I need you to record everything," I told him. "Audio and video if possible." "Already set up." He showed me a small device no bigger than a matchbox. "Digital recorder, voice activated, pin it inside your jacket. Battery's good for 6 hours." "And the backup?" Jerry held up his phone. "I'll be at the party anyway. Karen's friends with Maren. If something goes wrong with the recorder, I'll have my phone ready." We spent an hour going over details, timing, contingencies. Jerry had the methodical mind of someone who'd spent years in law enforcement before starting his security business. He thought through problems the way I thought through construction projects: measure twice, cut once. "What about afterward?" he asked. "Iris is going to be furious. Clement, too. You thought about how this affects your life going forward?" "My life's already affected," I said. "I just didn't know it until 3 weeks ago." That afternoon, I drove to the Anchor for lunch and found the place buzzing with conversation about the evening's party. Pauline was working the day shift, polishing glasses and listening to the regulars speculate about who would be there and what kind of spread Maren had planned. "Heard she hired that fancy catering company from Bangor," said Bill Morrison, no relation to Clement, despite the shared name. Bill was a retired lobsterman who treated the Anchor like his personal office. "Must be costing them a fortune." "Clement's practice is doing well," offered Margaret Vance, who cleaned houses for half the town and knew everyone's financial situation. "New patients every week. People trust him." I ordered a burger and listened to the conversation flow around me. Small towns thrived on gossip, but it was usually harmless. Who was dating whom? Which teenagers had been caught drinking behind the school, whose garden was producing the best tomatoes? Tonight, I was going to give them something more substantial to discuss. "You going to the party, Roland?" Pauline asked, setting my plate on the bar. "Wouldn't miss it." "Iris must be excited. She and Maren are so close." "Like sisters," I said. The burger tasted like cardboard, but I forced myself to eat. I'd need energy for the evening ahead. Around me, the conversation continued. Speculation about the party, updates on town politics, complaints about the weather. Normal life in a normal place, about to be disrupted by the kind of scandal that people would remember for years. At 4 o'clock, I went home to get ready. Iris was in our bedroom, trying on different jewelry combinations. The blue dress hung on the closet door, pressed and ready. "Which earrings?" she asked, holding up 2 pairs. "The pearls or the silver drops?" "Pearls," I said. "More elegant." She smiled and fastened them on, then turned to check her reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at her was beautiful, confident, ready for an evening of celebration. She had no idea she was getting dressed for her own execution. "I should shower," I said. "Don't take too long. We need to be there by 6:30. I stood under the hot water and thought about the evening ahead. In 3 hours, I would stand in front of 50 people and read explicit messages between my wife and her sister's husband. I would watch Maren's face crumble as she realized the scope of the betrayal. I would end 2 marriages before dessert was served. The water felt good on my shoulders, washing away the tension of the last 3 weeks. Soon it would be over. Soon everyone would know the truth. When I came out of the bathroom, Iris was sitting at her vanity, applying lipstick with the precision of an artist. The blue dress fit her perfectly, and the pearls caught the light when she moved her head. "You look stunning," I told her. "Thank you." She capped the lipstick and turned to face me. "I want tonight to be special for Maren and Clement. They've been so good to us over the years." "They certainly have." I put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one I'd worn to our wedding. It seemed appropriate somehow. The recorder fit perfectly inside the jacket pocket, invisible unless someone knew to look for it. "Ready?" Iris asked, checking her purse one final time. "Ready." We drove to the Riverside Event Hall in comfortable silence, the kind that had once felt intimate and now felt like the calm before a storm. Iris hummed along with the radio and pointed out houses decorated for Halloween. Jack-o'-lanterns grinned from front porches, and fake spider webs clung to mailboxes. "I love this time of year," she said. "Everything feels magical." "It's certainly going to be memorable," I replied. The event hall glowed with warm light against the darkening sky. Cars filled the parking lot, and I recognized most of them: family members, friends, longtime residents of our small town. People who'd known Maren and Clement since they were teenagers, who'd attended their wedding 10 years ago, who believed in their happiness. Inside, the main room had been transformed with flowers and candles. Round tables surrounded a small dance floor, and a bar occupied one corner. A string quartet played softly near the windows overlooking the river. Maren stood near the entrance, greeting guests in a cream-colored dress that made her look radiant. She hugged Iris tightly, then turned to me with a smile that could have powered the building. "Roland, thank you so much for coming. Doesn't everything look beautiful?" "Perfect," I said, and meant it. She'd created exactly the kind of elegant, romantic atmosphere that would make the evening's events even more shocking. Clement appeared at her side, handsome in his black suit, playing the role of devoted husband with practiced ease. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and thanked me for being there. "Wouldn't miss it," I told him. "I'm looking forward to the toasts." "Should be fun," he said. "Maren's brother is planning something elaborate. I might have a few words to share myself." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or concern. But then Maren was introducing us to other guests, and the moment passed. The next hour unfolded like any family celebration. Cocktails and conversation, updates on children and careers, reminiscences about shared memories. I moved through it all with the detached calm of someone watching a movie, knowing how the story would end while the other characters remained oblivious. Iris mingled easily, laughing at jokes and complimenting dresses. She and Clement managed to exchange several meaningful glances without appearing obvious about it. They'd had plenty of practice, I realized. 14 months of family gatherings had taught them how to communicate without words. At 7:30, we were called to dinner. I'd managed to position myself at a table with a clear view of the head table, where Maren and Clement sat with their parents and closest friends. Iris was 3 tables away, close enough to see my face clearly when the moment came. The meal was excellent. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, dinner rolls that melted in your mouth. Conversations flowed around me, but I barely participated. My attention was focused on the folded papers in my jacket pocket and the small recorder capturing every sound. As the servers cleared the main course, Maren's brother David stood up with his wine glass. The room gradually quieted, and he began the traditional anniversary toast, stories about the happy couple, jokes about marriage, wishes for the future. "To Maren and Clement," David concluded, raising his glass. "May your next 10 years be even happier than your first 10. The room erupted in applause and agreement. Glasses clinked, and people settled back into their conversations, expecting the formal part of the evening to be over. That's when I stood up. The scrape of my chair against the hardwood floor cut through the post-toast chatter like a blade. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some curious, others mildly annoyed that I was interrupting their conversations. At the head table, Maren looked surprised but pleased, another well-wisher wanting to honor their special day. Clement's expression was harder to read. Cautious, maybe. Or guilty. I raised my wine glass, and the room gradually quieted again. Someone at the back called out, "Speech!" and a few people chuckled. The string quartet had stopped playing, leaving only the sound of the river flowing past the windows. "Thank you," I said, my voice carrying easily in the acoustically perfect room. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but David's toast reminded me of something important, something about family and trust and the bonds that hold us together. Maren beamed at me from the head table. Iris looked puzzled, but supportive, the way wives do when their husbands make unexpected public gestures. Around the room, faces showed polite attention mixed with the mild impatience of people who wanted to get back to their conversations and dessert. 10 years of marriage, I continued, pulling the folded papers from my jacket pocket. That's a significant milestone. It represents thousands of shared moments, countless acts of faith, and the daily choice to honor the promises you made to each other. I unfolded the first page, making sure the movement was visible to everyone in the room. The paper crackled slightly in the silence. which is why I think it's important to celebrate not just the good times, but the honest communication that makes a marriage work, the intimate conversations that couples share when they think no one else is listening. At her table near the windows, Iris had gone very still. Something in my tone, or maybe the sight of the papers, had triggered her instincts. Her face had lost some of its color, but she hadn't yet grasped the full scope of what was about to happen. Clement, however, was beginning to understand. His hand had frozen halfway to his wine glass, and his eyes were fixed on the papers in my hands with the intensity of a man watching a loaded gun. "For instance," I said, looking directly at him, "this message from March 15th. Can't stop thinking about yesterday afternoon, the way you tasted, the sounds you made. I want to do it again, but slower this time, much slower." The words hit the room like a physical force. Conversations didn't just stop, they shattered. Forks clattered against plates. Someone's wine glass hit the floor and shattered, but nobody moved to clean it up. Maren's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "That message was sent at 2:17 a.m., I continued, consulting my papers with the methodical precision of someone reading a grocery list. "Sent from my wife's phone to her sister's husband, but maybe that was just a one-time thing, a moment of weakness." I turned to the next page. April 3rd. "Maren's visiting her mother this weekend. My house Saturday night. Bring that thing you did with your tongue last time." Sent at 10:43 a.m., right after Iris kissed me goodbye and told me she was going to book club. The silence in the room had weight now, pressing down on everyone like a physical presence. At table 6, Maren's mother had her hand pressed to her mouth. Clement's father was staring at his son with an expression of growing disgust, but I wasn't finished. May 20th. The family barbecue was perfect cover. While Roland flipped burgers and Maren fussed with the potato salad, all I could think about was your hands on me. "Next time, let's use your dental office. I've always wanted to try that chair." Maren made a sound then, not quite a scream, more like the noise a wounded animal makes. She pushed back from the table so hard her chair toppled over, but she didn't run. She stood there swaying slightly, staring at Clement with the expression of someone watching their entire world collapse. Clement tried to stand, tried to say something, but no words came out. His face had gone gray, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. June 7th, I continued relentlessly. July 15th, August 23rd, September 9th. 14 months of messages, people. 14 months of planning encounters, while the rest of us planned birthday parties and holiday dinners. I held up another page, this one containing the message that had started my investigation. And this, from 3 weeks ago, "Missing you already. Can't wait for next weekend." Sent at 2:17 a.m. while I was lying 3 feet away, thinking my wife was dreaming about our vacation plans. Around the room, people were beginning to react. Whispered conversations, shocked exclamations, the scrape of chairs as some guests tried to leave but found themselves too stunned to move. Jerry was recording everything from his position near the bar, his phone held discreetly at waist level. At table 4, Iris had finally found her voice. "Roland, stop." Her words cut through the silence like a whip crack. "Stop this right now." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in 3 weeks. The beautiful woman I'd married, the person I'd trusted with my heart and my future, the wife who'd kissed my forehead every morning while planning her next betrayal. "Stop reading the truth?" I asked. "Stop sharing the intimate communications between my wife and her sister's husband? But these are such beautiful expressions of love, Iris. Don't you want everyone to hear how poetic you can be?" I turned to a page near the back of the stack. October 2nd. "I love the way you make me feel like a teenager again. Sneaking around, lying to our spouses, meeting in secret places. It's like we're the stars of our own romantic movie. and they're just supporting characters who don't matter. That message broke something in Maren. She let out a wail that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest, a sound of pure anguish that made several people flinch. Then she turned on Clement, with fury I didn't know she possessed. "Is it true?" she screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. "Is it true, you lying piece of garbage?" Clement opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like a fish drowning in air. "Maren, I can explain." "Explain?" Her voice cracked with hysteria. "Explain 14 months of screwing my sister? Explain using our family gatherings to plan your affairs? Explain making me look like a fool in front of everyone we know?" She grabbed her wine glass and hurled it at him. It caught him in the chest, soaking his shirt with red wine that looked disturbingly like something else. He stumbled backward, knocking into his father's chair. But I still wasn't finished. "There's more," I announced, and the room somehow managed to get even quieter. So much more. Detailed descriptions of encounters, plans for future meetings, jokes about how clueless Maren and I are, pet names they call each other, photographs. I didn't actually have photographs, that was a bluff, but the way Clement's face went white told me I'd guessed correctly. 14 months, I repeated, looking around the room at the faces of family and friends. 14 months of lies, betrayal, and manipulation. While we celebrated birthdays and holidays, while we shared meals and made memories, while we trusted them with our hearts, they were laughing at us behind our backs. I folded the papers and put them back in my pocket. "So here's my toast," I said, raising my wine glass one final time. "To family, may we always know who's really sitting at our table." I drained the glass in one long swallow, set it on the table, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, the room exploded into chaos, shouting, crying, the crash of overturned furniture. Maren's voice rose above it all, hurling accusations and curses at Clement while her friends tried to restrain her. Iris called my name, but I didn't turn around. I'd said everything that needed saying. The cool October air felt like a blessing after the suffocating atmosphere inside. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and drove away from the Riverside Event Hall, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 marriages and the stunned silence of a community that would never look at family gatherings the same way again. In my rearview mirror, I could see people streaming out of the building, some heading for their cars, others clustering in small groups to discuss what they'd just witnessed. The party was definitely over, but for me, the evening was just beginning. I drove home through empty streets, past houses where normal families were settling in for quiet Saturday evenings. Television screens flickered behind curtained windows, and jack-o'-lanterns grinned from front porches, their candles burning steadily in the still air. Everything looked exactly as it had 2 hours ago, but the world had fundamentally changed. My phone started ringing before I reached my driveway. Iris, probably. Or maybe Jerry, checking to make sure I'd made it home safely. I let it ring. The house felt different when I walked inside, emptier somehow, though nothing had been moved or changed. I went straight to my workshop and opened a beer, then sat in my favorite chair and waited for whatever came next. The first car arrived 20 minutes later. Headlights swept across my workshop windows, followed by the slam of a car door and footsteps on the gravel driveway. The front door opened without a knock. Iris, using her key. "Roland!" Her voice echoed through the house, sharp with anger and desperation. "Roland, where are you?" I took another sip of beer and listened to her heels clicking across the hardwood floors above. She was still wearing the blue dress, still playing the part of the elegant party guest, though by now the performance had lost its audience. "Down here," I called. She appeared at the top of the workshop stairs, and even in the harsh fluorescent light, she looked beautiful. Angry, but beautiful. Her makeup was smudged, and her carefully styled hair had come loose, but the fury in her green eyes gave her an intensity that was almost magnetic. "What have you done?" she demanded, starting down the stairs. "What have you done to our family?" Our family. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Which family would that be, Iris? The one where you and Clement sneak around behind our backs? Or the one where we pretend to be happy while you plan your next encounter? She reached the bottom of the stairs and stood there, hands clenched into fists at her sides. The blue dress that had looked so elegant an hour ago now seemed like a costume from a play that had closed badly. You had no right, she said. No right to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. No right to destroy Maren's marriage. No right to air our private business in public. Private business. I stood up, the beer bottle still in my hand. Is that what you call it? I call it adultery. I call it betrayal. I call it 14 months of lies. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said, and for the first time, her voice cracked slightly. It just did. These things happen, Roland. People make mistakes. Mistakes? I nodded slowly. Right, like accidentally sending explicit text messages, like accidentally meeting in secret, like accidentally planning encounters during family gatherings. 14 months of accidents. She moved closer, and I could smell her perfume, the same scent she'd worn on our wedding day. It seemed obscene somehow that she would wear our scent while betraying our marriage. We can work through this, she said, reaching for my arm. Couples do it all the time. We can go to counseling. We can rebuild trust. We can… No. I stepped back, away from her touch. We can't. Because this isn't a mistake, Iris. This is who you are. This is who you chose to be. My phone rang again. This time I answered it. Roland? Jerry's voice was tight with concern. You okay, man? Things got pretty intense after you left. I'm fine. What happened? Maren went after Clement with a butter knife. Took 3 people to restrain her. Cops showed up, but nobody wanted to press charges. Most of the guests cleared out, but some are still there, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. And Clement? Gone. Took off right after you did. Left Maren at the party with her family. I looked at Iris, who was listening to every word. Her face had gone pale again. Thanks for recording everything, I said. No problem. Roland, you sure you thought this through? This is going to get messy. It was already messy, I said. Now it's just honest. After I hung up, Iris and I stared at each other across the workshop. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, filled with 6 years of shared history and 14 months of lies. Where do we go from here? She asked finally. We don't go anywhere, I said. You pack your things and leave, tonight. This is my house too. This is the house where you lived while cheating on me with your sister's husband. This is the house where you planned your affairs and laughed about how clueless I was. You want to stay here? She looked around the workshop, at my tools, my workbench, the projects in various stages of completion. This had always been my space, but she'd come down here sometimes, bringing me coffee or just talking while I worked. Those moments had felt intimate, special. Now they seemed contaminated. I'll need time to find a place, she said. You can stay at a motel, or with Taylor, or maybe Clement has some suggestions. Her face hardened. Don't be cruel, Roland. Cruel? I laughed again. You want to see cruel? Cruel is reading text messages about how much you enjoyed betraying me. Cruel is realizing that every family gathering was a performance. Cruel is discovering that the woman I married thinks I'm a joke. I never said that. October 7th. Roland's so focused on his little projects, he wouldn't notice if I brought Clement home for dinner. Sometimes I think I could screw him on the kitchen table and my husband would just ask if we needed more coffee. The words hit her like physical blows. She flinched, stepped back, wrapped her arms around herself as if she were cold. I didn't mean it like that, she whispered. How did you mean it? She couldn't answer. Maybe because there wasn't an answer, or maybe because she finally understood that explanations wouldn't fix this. Some things, once broken, stayed broken. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Roland Hart? The voice was male, unfamiliar, and angry. Speaking. This is David Morrison, Maren's brother. I want to talk to you. About what? About what you did to my sister tonight. About how you destroyed her marriage in front of 50 people. About how you could have handled this privately, instead of turning it into a public execution. I looked at Iris, who was watching my face intently. Your sister's marriage was destroyed 14 months ago, I said. I just made sure she found out about it. You humiliated her. You turned her anniversary party into a nightmare she'll never forget. Clement and Iris turned it into a nightmare. I just provided the soundtrack. David was quiet for a moment, and I could hear voices in the background, people arguing, someone crying. Maren's in the hospital, he said finally. Panic attack. The doctors say she'll be okay, but she's asking for you. For me? She wants to thank you. She says you're the only one who told her the truth. After David hung up, I sat back down in my chair. Iris was still standing at the bottom of the stairs, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Maren's in the hospital, I said. I heard. Her voice was very small. Is she okay? She will be, eventually. Roland, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could take it all back, but you can't. I finished my beer and set the bottle on my workbench. That's the thing about choices, Iris. Once you make them, you live with the consequences. She started crying then. Not the dramatic sobs of someone performing grief, but the quiet, hopeless tears of someone who finally understood what they'd lost. It might have been the first genuine emotion she'd shown all evening. What about us? She asked through the tears. What about our marriage? What marriage? I stood up and walked past her toward the stairs. The one where you planned affairs during family dinners? The one where you joked about how stupid I was? The one where you spent 14 months lying to my face? At the top of the stairs, I turned back to look at her. Pack your things, Iris. Be gone by morning, and leave your key. I went to bed alone that night for the first time in 6 years. The house felt enormous and quiet, full of echoes and empty spaces. Somewhere in town, Maren was lying in a hospital bed, trying to process the wreckage of her marriage. Clement was probably driving toward whatever new life he thought he could build from the ashes of his reputation. And Iris was packing her belongings, sorting through 6 years of shared possessions, and deciding what belonged to whom when a marriage dissolved into recriminations and betrayal. I should have felt victorious. I'd exposed the truth, ended the deception, made sure everyone knew exactly who they were dealing with. Justice had been served with perfect precision. Instead, I felt empty, hollow, like a house after the family moves out, full of space where life used to be. But hollow was better than foolish. Empty was better than betrayed. And tomorrow, I would start figuring out what came next. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that matched the mood settling over our small town like fog. I woke to an empty house and the sound of rain against the bedroom windows. Iris's car was gone from the driveway, along with her clothes, her books, and the framed photographs that had documented our life together. She'd left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to a note written on the back of an envelope. I'm staying at Taylor's. We need to talk about lawyers and dividing things up. I'm sorry it ended this way. I threw the note in the trash and made coffee. The kitchen felt different without her presence, larger but somehow less functional, like a machine missing essential parts. 6 years of shared routines had created patterns that were hard to break. I kept reaching for a second mug before remembering I was drinking alone. My phone had been ringing since 7 a.m. Jerry called to check on me. My sister called from Boston after hearing about the party through the family network. 3 reporters from local papers wanted interviews about what they were calling the toast heard round the county. I ignored most of the calls, but answered when Maren's number appeared on the screen. Roland? Her voice sounded fragile, like glass that had been cracked but not yet shattered. "It's Maren. I'm home from the hospital. How are you feeling?" Like my entire life was a lie. A bitter laugh. "The doctors gave me something for anxiety, but it doesn't help with the humiliation. Everyone we know was there, Roland. Everyone." "I know. I'm sorry it happened that way." "No." Her voice grew stronger. "Don't apologize. You did what you had to do. What I should have done if I'd been brave enough to see the truth." Through the phone, I could hear her moving around, footsteps on hardwood, the sound of papers rustling. "I found more evidence," she said. "After you left last night, I went through Clement's things, credit card statements, hotel receipts, charges at restaurants I've never been to. It goes back further than 14 months, Roland. Much further." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "How much further?" 2 years, maybe longer. There are charges from our honeymoon period, for God's sake. While I was planning our wedding, he was probably already cheating." I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to process this information. Bad enough that my wife had betrayed me for 14 months, but Maren had been living a lie for most of her marriage. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Divorce him, obviously. I already called a lawyer. Sandra Kellerman, she handles family law in Bangor. She says I have grounds for everything I want. The house, the practice, spousal support. Clement's going to wish he'd never learned my sister's phone number." The venom in her voice was startling. Sweet, accommodating Maren had been replaced by someone harder, angrier, more focused. Betrayal had a way of clarifying things. "And Iris?" she asked. "What's happening with you two?" "She moved out last night. We'll need lawyers too, I suppose." "Good." The word came out sharp and final. "She doesn't deserve forgiveness, Roland. Neither of them do. They made their choices, and now they get to live with the consequences." After Maren hung up, I sat in the quiet kitchen and thought about consequences. In construction, every action had a reaction. Cut a support beam, and the floor above might collapse. Remove a load-bearing wall, and the entire structure could shift. I'd removed the lies that were supporting 2 marriages, and now we were all dealing with the structural damage. Around noon, Jerry stopped by with sandwiches from the deli and updates on the town's reaction to the previous night's events. "It's all anyone's talking about," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "The Anchor was packed this morning, everybody trying to piece together what they'd witnessed." "What's the general consensus?" "Mixed. Some people think you handled it perfectly. They're calling you a hero for exposing the truth. Others think you should have dealt with it privately. That airing dirty laundry in public was cruel to Maren." I bit into my sandwich and considered this. "What do you think?" Jerry was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I think you were hurt and angry, and you wanted everyone to know what had been done to you. I understand that. But Roland, there's going to be fallout from this. Long-term consequences you might not have considered." "Such as?" "This is a small town. People have long memories. Some folks are always going to see you as the guy who destroyed a family celebration. Others will see you as the wronged husband who stood up for himself. Either way, you're going to be defined by what happened last night." He was right, of course. In small towns, stories became legends, and legends became identity. I would forever be the man who gave the toast that ended 2 marriages. "Any word on Clement?" I asked. "He's staying at the motel out on Route 1. Word is he's looking for an apartment in Bangor, maybe thinking about relocating his practice. Can't blame him. Half his patients are probably reconsidering their dental care options." That afternoon, I drove to the Anchor for a late lunch and to gauge the local mood for myself. The parking lot was fuller than usual for a Sunday, and conversations quieted when I walked through the door. Not hostile, exactly, but watchful. Like people trying to decide how to react to a celebrity they weren't sure they admired. Pauline was working behind the bar, and she gave me a nod that seemed approving. "Heard you had quite an evening," she said, pulling a beer without being asked. You could say that. Takes guts to do what you did. Most people would have just suffered in silence. Around the bar, heads nodded in agreement. These were working people, folks who valued straight talk and honest dealing. They understood betrayal and respected someone who stood up for themselves, but not everyone felt that way. As I was finishing my burger, Taylor walked in with two friends I didn't recognize. She spotted me immediately, and her face flushed with anger. "There he is," she announced loudly enough for half the bar to hear. "The man who destroyed his own family for the sake of revenge." The conversation in the room died. Everyone turned to watch what would happen next. I swiveled on my bar stool to face her. "Hello, Taylor. How's Iris settling in?" "She's devastated, if you care, which you obviously don't, or you wouldn't have humiliated her in front of everyone she knows." "I didn't humiliate her," I said calmly. I read her own words back to her. If she found that humiliating, maybe she should have thought about that before sending the messages. "You could have handled it privately. You could have confronted her at home, worked things out like adults. Instead, you turned it into a public spectacle." Several people in the bar were nodding along with Taylor's words. She had supporters here, people who thought I'd gone too far. "You're right," I said. "I could have handled it privately. I could have sat Iris down and asked her to explain 14 months of explicit messages with her sister's husband. I could have given her a chance to lie to my face some more, to promise it would never happen again, to beg for forgiveness she didn't deserve." I stood up and faced the room, addressing not just Taylor, but everyone who was listening. "But here's the thing. It wasn't just my marriage she destroyed. It was Maren's, too. And Maren deserved to know the truth about the man she was married to. She deserved to know that her anniversary party was being used as cover for her husband's affair. She deserved to know that her sister was laughing at her behind her back." "You could have told her privately," Taylor insisted. "Could I? When? During family gatherings where Clement and Iris were performing their happy marriage act? At birthday parties where they were sneaking away together? When exactly should I have pulled Maren aside and told her that her husband and sister were betraying her?" The room was completely silent now. Even Taylor's friends looked uncomfortable. "The truth is," I continued, "there was no good way to handle this. No clean way to expose what they were doing without causing pain. So I chose the way that made sure everyone knew exactly what kind of people they were dealing with. I chose honesty over comfort. I threw money on the bar for my meal and headed for the door. As I reached it, Pauline called out, "Roland?" I turned back. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you did the right thing." Several other people nodded in agreement. Not everyone, but enough to matter. That evening, I sat in my workshop and tried to plan my next steps. Divorce proceedings would take months. I'd need to find a lawyer, divide our assets, figure out what my life looked like as a single man in his late 30s. The house would probably have to be sold, too many memories and too much space for one person. My phone rang. Iris again. "Roland, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "About the house, about our things, about how we're going to handle this." "Handle what?" "The divorce, the lawyers, dividing our property." "Seems straightforward to me. You betrayed our marriage, so you get nothing." "It doesn't work that way. Maine is a no-fault state. The courts don't care who cheated." She was probably right. I'd have to give her half of everything we'd built together, including the house I'd renovated with my own hands. The thought made me sick. "Fine," I said. "Get a lawyer. I'll get a lawyer. We'll let them sort it out." "Roland," her voice softened, "I know you hate me right now. I know you think I'm a terrible person. But we had good years together. We loved each other once. Can't we try to end this with some dignity?" "Dignity?" I almost laughed. "You want to talk about dignity after what you did? After the messages I read last night?" I made mistakes. Huge, awful mistakes. But destroying me publicly doesn't undo them. "No," I agreed. But it makes sure everyone knows who you really are. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my workshop and thought about the conversation. She wasn't wrong. We had loved each other once. Our marriage had contained real moments of happiness, genuine affection, shared dreams for the future. But those moments had been built on lies. Every kiss, every laugh, every plan we'd made together had been contaminated by her betrayal. The woman I'd loved had never really existed. She'd been a performance, a carefully constructed character designed to hide the person who could betray her own sister. Outside, rain continued to fall on the empty town. Tomorrow would bring new conversations, new reactions, new consequences from the choice I'd made at the anniversary party. Some people would support me, others would condemn me, and everyone would have an opinion about what I should have done differently. But I wouldn't change anything. The truth was worth the cost, even if that cost was everything I'd thought I wanted. Especially then. 3 weeks after the anniversary party, autumn had settled over Maine with the finality of a closing door. The maple trees along Main Street blazed orange and red, and the morning air carried the sharp scent of wood smoke from chimneys that hadn't been used since spring. It was the kind of weather that usually made me appreciate living in a small town, but this year everything felt different. I was finishing breakfast when Jerry called with news that made my coffee taste like ash. "Clement's back," he said without preamble. "Saw his car parked outside the dental office this morning. Word is he's trying to salvage his practice." I set down my mug and stared out the kitchen window at the empty driveway where Iris's car used to sit. "How's that working out for him?" "Not well. Margaret Vance canceled her appointment yesterday, and the Hendersons switched to that new dentist in Bangor. People are voting with their feet." It shouldn't have surprised me. Small towns had long memories and strong opinions about moral conduct. Clement might be technically skilled at his job, but trust was a different matter entirely. Once people started questioning your character, they questioned everything else too. "What about Iris?" Jerry asked. "Any word from her?" "Her lawyer called yesterday. They want to schedule mediation for the property division." "You getting a lawyer?" "Meeting with Sandra Kellerman this afternoon. Figured if she's good enough for Maren, she's good enough for me." After Jerry hung up, I drove to the hardware store to pick up supplies for a kitchen renovation project. The Hendersons had decided to expand their home improvements after switching dentists, which meant steady work for the next month. I needed the distraction. The store was busy for a Tuesday morning, and I recognized most of the faces: contractors, homeowners, retirees working on projects to fill their days. Normal people living normal lives, unmarked by the kind of scandal that had consumed my world for the past 3 weeks. I was loading lumber into my truck when a voice behind me made my shoulders tense. "Roland?" I turned to find Clement standing 10 feet away, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in 3 weeks. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive clothes hung loose on a frame that had lost weight. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he wasn't sleeping well. "Clement." I kept loading boards, not particularly interested in whatever he'd come to say. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." "Yes, we do." He moved closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath despite the early hour. "You destroyed my life, my marriage, my practice, my reputation. Everything I worked for gone because you wanted revenge." I stopped loading and faced him fully. Around the parking lot, other customers were beginning to notice our conversation. In a small town, any interaction between us would be news within the hour. "I destroyed your life?" I kept my voice level, conversational. "That's interesting. I thought you destroyed your life when you started screwing your wife's sister." His face flushed red. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It developed over time. These things are complicated, Roland. You wouldn't understand." "You're right. I don't understand how a man betrays his wife with her own sister. I don't understand how someone uses family gatherings to plan affairs. and I definitely don't understand how you have the nerve to stand here and blame me for exposing what you did. You could have handled it differently, quietly, without destroying innocent people. Innocent people? I laughed, a sound with sharp edges. Which innocent people would those be? Iris, who spent 14 months lying to my face. You, who used your dental office to cheat on your wife? Or are you talking about Maren, the actually innocent person who deserved to know the truth about her marriage? Clement stepped closer, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. This was a man with nothing left to lose, which made him dangerous in unpredictable ways. Maren's filing for divorce, he said. She wants everything: the house, the practice, spousal support. Her lawyer says she can destroy me financially. Good. I have patients who depend on me, people who need dental care. If I lose my practice, they lose their dentist. Then you should have thought about that before you started your affair. It's over now. Iris and I, we ended it. We realized we made a mistake, and we ended it. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. When? What? When did you end it? Before or after I read your messages at the anniversary party? He couldn't meet my eyes. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. You didn't end anything, Clement. You got caught. There's a difference. A truck pulled into the parking space next to us, and Bill Morrison climbed out. He nodded to me, then noticed Clement, and his expression hardened. "Morning, Roland," Bill said pointedly, ignoring Clement entirely. "Morning, Bill." Bill loaded his purchases and drove away without acknowledging Clement's existence. It was a small gesture, but in a town this size, small gestures carried weight. People were choosing sides, and Clement was discovering which side he was on. "Look," Clement said after Bill left, "I know I screwed up. I know I hurt people, but continuing this vendetta isn't helping anyone." "Vendetta?" I secured the last board in my truck bed. "I'm not continuing anything. I exposed the truth, and now we're all living with the consequences. That's not vendetta, that's justice." "Justice?" His voice rose, drawing attention from other customers. "You call destroying 2 marriages justice?" "I call it honesty. You and Iris destroyed your marriages. I just made sure everyone knew about it." I climbed into my truck and started the engine. Clement stood beside the driver's door, looking like he wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. "Stay away from me, Clement," I said through the open window, "and stay away from my wife." "She's not your wife anymore." "Exactly." That afternoon, I met with Sandra Kellerman in her Bangor office. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who radiated the kind of competence that came from handling messy divorces for 20 years. "I've reviewed the financial documents you provided," she said, spreading papers across her desk. "The good news is that your assets are relatively straightforward. The house, your business equipment, joint savings accounts, retirement funds, no complicated investments or hidden assets." "What's the bad news?" "Maine is a no-fault divorce state, which means the court doesn't consider adultery when dividing property. Regardless of what your wife did, she's entitled to an equitable distribution of marital assets." I'd expected this, but it still stung. So she gets half of everything, even though she's the one who cheated? Probably, unless we can prove she spent marital funds on the affair, hotel rooms, gifts, things like that. The court will treat this as a standard dissolution of marriage. Sandra leaned back in her chair and studied me with the expression of someone who'd seen this story play out dozens of times. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Hart? Off the record?" "Sure." "Do you regret how you handled the revelation, the public nature of it?" I thought about the question, really considered it. 3 weeks of consequences, 3 weeks of living with the aftermath of my choice. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. Maren deserved to know the truth, and she deserved to know it before she wasted any more years on a man who was betraying her. The public nature was unfortunate, but necessary." "Necessary how?" "Because if I'd handled it privately, Iris would have convinced me to keep quiet to protect Maren's feelings. She would have promised to end the affair, begged for another chance, made it about our marriage instead of about the truth, and Maren would still be living a lie. Sandra nodded slowly. That's probably accurate. But you understand that your approach has consequences beyond the divorce proceedings. Your reputation in the community, your business relationships, your social connections. I understand. And you're prepared to live with those consequences? I'm already living with them. On the drive home, I thought about Sandra's questions and my answers. The truth was, I hadn't fully considered all the ramifications when I stood up at that anniversary party. I'd been focused on exposing the betrayal, on making sure everyone knew what kind of people Iris and Clement really were. But 3 weeks later, the consequences were becoming clear. Some people supported my actions, saw me as someone who'd stood up for truth and justice. Others viewed me as cruel, someone who'd chosen public humiliation over private resolution. My business hadn't suffered. If anything, I was busier than before. People seemed to respect someone who wouldn't be pushed around, who demanded honesty in his relationships. But my social life had changed dramatically. Invitations to parties and gatherings had dried up, partly because people weren't sure which side to take, and partly because I reminded everyone of uncomfortable truths about marriage and fidelity. I was pulling into my driveway when my phone rang. Maren's number. Roland, I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all. How are you holding up? Better, actually. I signed the divorce papers today. Sandra says we should have everything finalized within 6 months. That's good news. It is. And Roland, I wanted to thank you again for telling the truth. I know it cost you your marriage, and I know some people think you handled it wrong, but I'm grateful. I needed to know. You deserved to know. I've been thinking about what comes next, she said. After the divorce is final, I mean. I'm going to sell the house, maybe move somewhere new, start over. That sounds healthy. What about you? Any plans? I looked at the house Iris and I had shared, at the workshop where I'd discovered her betrayal, at the driveway where her car used to sit. I'm thinking about starting over too, I said. After Maren hung up, I sat in my truck and watched the sun set behind the trees that bordered my property. Tomorrow would bring more work, more conversations about the divorce, more reminders of what my life had become since that October evening when I'd stood up and told the truth. But for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt something approaching peace. Not happiness. That would take longer to find. But peace with my choices, with the consequences, with the man I'd chosen to be when tested. Some people might call what I did cruel. Others might call it justice. I called it necessary. And sometimes, necessary was enough.